The letter arrived in a plain white envelope addressed to Donald J. Trump. There was no official seal, no media buzz, just a quiet delivery from a small town in Ohio. Inside was a handwritten note from a 10-year-old boy named Daniel Whitmore. "Dear Mr. Trump," it read, "I know you're very busy, but my dad is getting a medal this month at our town ceremony. He saved lives. He always liked you. I don't have many people to invite, but I know it would make him smile. Love, Daniel." Trump held the letter in his hand, longer than usual. His schedule was packed, speeches lined up, the campaign trail heating up again, but something in the boy's handwriting struck a chord, simple, honest, and raw. Without informing his team, he circled the date in red ink and gave just 2 words to his assistant: "I'm going." 3 weeks later, his jet descended over Fremont, Ohio. No red carpets, no cheering crowds, just overcast skies and a small auditorium near the town square. The locals were shocked. Some thought it was a prank. Others assumed it had to be a look-alike. But when Trump stepped out of the black SUV in a navy suit and red tie, people froze. "He really came," a woman whispered. The auditorium was packed with folding chairs and framed photos of local heroes. Daniel stood near the front, his small hands clutching a program, his eyes wide as Trump approached. "You must be Daniel," Trump said, bending slightly. "Your letter brought me here." Daniel blinked. "Really? You got it?" Trump smiled. "Yes. Let's make your dad proud." As the music began and the ceremony opened, something unusual happened. No one clapped. The silence wasn't cold or disrespectful. It was thick, heavy with emotion. Standing quietly near the back, President Trump looked confused but not offended. As the first name was called, a woman stepped forward to receive a medal on behalf of her late husband. Her hands trembled. Still, no applause. The mayor, his voice shaking with age and feeling, continued reading names: local firefighters, paramedics, military veterans, even a high school janitor who had rescued children from a fire. One by one, they came forward, accepted their medals, and returned to their seats in solemn silence. Trump scanned the room. There were no cameras, no media, just family members, neighbors, and quiet faces, each one filled with something too deep for words. He leaned toward the woman beside him and asked softly, "Why is no one clapping?" She looked at him kindly and whispered, "We made a decision this year. This is a ceremony of reflection, not celebration. Everyone we're honoring saved someone else, but lost something themselves." Trump slowly nodded as she added, "This is about grief and love. We all carry both." Just then, young Daniel turned in his seat and gave Trump a small thumbs up. "Almost Dad's turn," he whispered. Trump offered a faint smile, but his heart stirred with a deep unease. This was no ordinary event. It was a room full of pain, of silent sacrifice, and it was about to become deeply personal. When the name Staff Sergeant Mark Whitmore was called, the entire room rose, not with applause, but with reverence. Still, no one clapped. A photograph lit up the screen behind the podium. A broad-shouldered man in desert camouflage, holding a small American flag in one hand and Daniel in the other. Then a woman stepped forward, Mark's wife, Daniel's mother, her presence quiet, but strong, ready to speak in the place of a man who gave everything. Her voice cracked as she faced the audience. "Mark served 3 tours," she began. "He never wanted recognition. He only ever said, 'Promise me you'll raise our son with kindness.'" Her hands gripped the edges of the podium for strength. "Last year, he saved a boy from drowning in the local river, but he didn't make it back himself." A collective breath rippled through the crowd. Even Trump's jaw clenched. "I asked Daniel who he wanted to invite to this ceremony," she continued, her eyes scanning the room. "He said, 'Someone who believes in my dad.'" Then she looked directly at Trump. "Thank you for coming. I know people may judge you differently, but today, you're not here as a politician. You're here as a person. That's all my son wanted. Now Daniel stood beside her, clutching a folded American flag against his chest. The mayor stepped forward and gently placed a medal on Daniel's shirt. There were no trumpets, no applause, just silence once again. But this time, tears streamed quietly down faces. Trump reached for a tissue in his pocket, but looked frozen. He had attended thousands of events in his lifetime, but this room, this moment, felt sacred. And he hadn't yet realized the most powerful part of the ceremony was still to come. As the mayor approached with one final medal, he paused, his voice more unsteady than before. "There is one medal that was never claimed," he said, holding up a silver badge inscribed with the words "for courage, without witness." It belonged to a man who saved 3 strangers in a train crash last spring. He left before anyone could thank him. A soft murmur swept through the room. Whispers grew as people turned, exchanging uncertain glances. Something unspoken hung in the air, something unfinished. No one knew the man's name, only that he wore a coat, a hat pulled low over his face, and disappeared into the night. Trump watched closely, something stirring in his memory. He leaned toward the mayor and asked, "Do you have a photo?" The mayor blinked, surprised. "Just a blurry one. Why?" "Show me," Trump said. The image was pulled from a folder, and though it was grainy, Trump's eyes narrowed. That coat, that posture, it couldn't be. But deep down, he knew. "That's my former driver," Trump whispered. His name was Hank Braddock. He vanished 2 months ago. Trump remembered him, clearly a quiet man in his 50s who had driven him across states without fail. Never asked for a raise, never missed a day. Then one morning, Hank had simply left a handwritten note. "Time to do something real. Thank you." No one knew where he had gone, and, till now, rising slowly, Trump spoke aloud. "I know who saved those people." All eyes turned to him. It wasn't a dramatic revelation, just a quiet truth spoken from the heart. "Hank Braddock. He drove for me over 3 years, a veteran. He said he wanted to help people more directly. I didn't know what that meant until now." The mayor stared in disbelief. "You're sure?" Trump nodded. "His walk, that coat, it's him." The room fell silent until, slowly, a ripple of soft clapping began. A few hands, then more, not for Trump, but for Hank. The applause drifted like wind through the auditorium, gentle, powerful, and real. Trump sat back down. Something inside him shifted. He had come to honor others, but this ceremony was quietly asking him to look inward. When it ended, people lingered, some hugging, others sitting in still reflection. Trump remained in his seat, surrounded by strangers, feeling something unfamiliar, human. Daniel approached, holding 2 cups of punch. "We don't clap," he said with a small smile, "but we share." Trump chuckled and took a cup. "That's a good rule." Daniel looked up at him. "Did you ever lose someone you didn't get to thank?" Trump was quiet for a long moment. "My brother," he said softly, "a long time ago. He taught me a lot about what not to do in life. I just wish I'd told him that before he passed," Trump said quietly. Daniel nodded, as if he understood. "More than most 10-year-olds. That's why I wrote you," he replied. "I wanted someone big to remember someone small, so they wouldn't be forgotten." Trump's throat tightened. He placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You're not small, kid, and your dad. He's unforgettable." As the crowd thinned, there were no reporters, no selfies, just townspeople moving slowly beneath a gray Ohio sky. Yet, the emotional weight lingered with Trump as he walked to the parking lot and paused, looking back at the quiet auditorium. No one clapped, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't need it. Fremont, Ohio, didn't make headlines. It had no skyscrapers, no influencers, no viral trends. It had a diner with paper menus, a barbershop where people still paid in cash, and a community that believed in showing up, not showing off. Trump's team had scrambled to prepare for media, photo ops, and crowd control. None of that happened. The town refused the spectacle. "We don't treat grief like content," the mayor had said gently, and Trump understood. That night, back in his hotel, he found it hard to sleep. The silence from that ceremony echoed louder than any stadium crowd. But in that silence, he heard something rare, something real. Once back in Washington, Trump called in a favor. He asked a friend in the Veterans Network to help locate Hank Braddock. The search took a week. They found him living in a modest cabin outside Pittsburgh, helping build homes for displaced veterans. Trump didn't send a car. He went himself. When Hank opened the door, he froze. "I figured you'd find me," he said quietly. Trump held out the silver medal. "This belongs to you." Hank stared at it. "I didn't do it for this." "I know," Trump replied, "but it's not just a medal. It's a story Daniel will grow up hearing. It's about remembering the quiet ones." Later, Trump sat alone in his office. Daniel's letter, now framed, hung on the wall beside him. "Dear Mr. Trump, I know you're very busy." He read it again and again. One letter, one child, one quiet ceremony in a town no one talks about. It had changed the way he understood honor, and as he drafted his next speech, he paused this time. There were no applause lines or slogans at the top. He began instead with a story about a little boy, a folded flag, and a room full of people who clapped with their hearts instead of their hands. 1 week later, Trump stood before a massive rally in Arizona. Thousands had gathered, cheers echoed through the stadium, and cameras flashed from every angle. But when he reached the podium, he held up a single piece of paper. "I want to tell you about a boy named Daniel," he said. The crowd fell silent. "I went to his town. There were no cameras, no cheering, just people who had lost loved ones and honored them in silence." He paused. "I've given many speeches in my life, but at that ceremony, no one clapped. And that silence taught me more than applause ever could." The audience remained still. This wasn't his usual firebrand tone. It was something softer, more reflective. Looking out over the crowd, he added, "Sometimes the quietest rooms hold the loudest truths." He folded the paper, and for a moment, the crowd didn't cheer. They just listened. And in that moment, Trump realized that was enough. Back in Fremont, Daniel sat in his living room watching the clip on a grainy TV. "Mom, he talked about us," he shouted, his eyes wide with wonder. His mother smiled. He remembered. She wasn't surprised. Daniel had a way of making people pause and think, just like his father. She pulled him into a hug. "Your dad would be proud," she whispered. Daniel looked back at the screen, where Trump was speaking from the heart. "He didn't forget," Daniel said softly. "He really listened, and that meant everything." After that speech, something unexpected happened. Trump's office received over 7,000 letters in just 1 week. Not fan mail or political praise, just stories. Stories of uncles who ran into burning homes, of grandparents who died serving their country, of mothers who worked 3 jobs to raise families, and of children, hundreds of children writing letters just like Daniel's. "I don't know if you'll read this, but my dad always said to thank people while you can." The letters came from small towns like Fremont, often unnoticed, but full of quiet heroes. Trump assigned a team to read every single one, and he began replying. Then, one morning, he made an announcement not for politics, but for people. Every month, he would personally recognize one unsung hero from a small town, chosen from the letters submitted by citizens. No press, no cameras, just a visit, a handshake, and heartfelt thanks. He called it the Quiet Honor Project. And the very first name on the list was Hank Braddock. Hank didn't want cameras, but he allowed Trump to visit the building site where he was helping provide shelter for homeless veterans. "You're doing more than building homes," Trump said quietly. "You're rebuilding lives." And for the first time, Hank smiled. Days later, Daniel received a package in the mail bearing a gold seal. Inside was a metal knot, one for valor or bravery, but one that simply read, "For reminding the world what matters most." Alongside it was a handwritten note, "Dear Daniel, you didn't just honor your dad. You reminded me that the greatest strength comes from the quietest hearts. Donald J. Trump." Daniel clutched the medal to his chest and looked up at the sky. "Did you see that, Dad?" he whispered. "I think you did." At school, Daniel's teacher asked each student to bring something that inspired them. Kids brought baseballs, drawings, stuffed animals. When it was Daniel's turn, he stood in front of the class, holding up the medal. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about remembering the people who help, even if no one sees them." The classroom fell silent, and then, slowly, one by one, his classmates clapped. It was the first real applause Daniel had heard since the ceremony, and this time it felt just right. 2 months later, on a crisp fall afternoon, a black SUV pulled quietly into Fremont. No security detail, no red carpet. Trump stepped out, holding a simple bouquet of flowers. He wasn't there for photos. He walked alone to a small cemetery, found the grave of Staff Sergeant Mark Whitmore, and knelt. "Thank you," he whispered, "for your service, for your son, for reminding me what honor looks like." From a distance, Daniel and his mom watched, hand in hand. For the first time since the funeral, she smiled through her tears. Fremont quietly became known as the town that made Trump pause, not in headlines, not on television, but in the hearts of those who saw him change. He talked less about winning and more about meaning, less about noise and more about truth, and when asked what changed him, he would always smile and say, "Blame Daniel." Months passed. Then one morning, Daniel received one last letter from Trump's office. Inside was a photo of Trump and Hank Braddock, standing with newly housed veterans, and a short message. "Dear Daniel, the world doesn't change through applause. It changes through people like you. Keep writing letters. DJT." Daniel pinned it beside the photo of his father. Looking out the window at the rising sun, he whispered, "I think we did good, Dad." Years later, Daniel would grow up and tell his children the story of a small town, a silent auditorium, and a president who didn't come for attention but because of a little boy's letter. "He didn't come to be clapped for," Daniel would say. "He came to remember, and that made all the difference." And on one quiet day, now older, Daniel returned to that same auditorium to lay flowers by his father's memorial. There was no crowd, no ceremony, just silence. But Daniel smiled, because now he understood. They never clapped, not because they didn't care, but because some moments are too sacred for noise. And in that sacred stillness, hearts speak louder than hands ever could.